Imagine for a moment the most intimidating person you've ever encountered. Not the loudest, not the richest, but the one whose silence felt heavier than anyone else's noise. They didn't have to prove anything. Their presence simply was. Why? Because true power, the kind that both commands respect and inspires fear, is an internal achievement. It is the unblinking, disciplined mind of a warrior, not the noisy, impulsive rush of a child. We often confuse mastery with aggression or wealth, but the ancient Stoics, Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, understood that the most formidable empire you will ever rule is the one between your ears. Today, we're not chasing comfort or surface-level motivation. We are going to forge a mind so impassively controlled that it fundamentally alters how the world interacts with you. We'll uncover the single most common delusion about self-mastery, a flaw that guarantees failure. And by the end of this journey, you'll know exactly how to close that gap. This path, however, requires a candid warning. This philosophy is a practical tool for building resilience and moral clarity. It is not a substitute for professional counsel, nor is it a prescription for instant success. It's an educational framework for reflection. For personal decisions, particularly those touching on well-being, finance, or law, prudent individuals consult qualified, expert sources. Our focus here is solely on the architecture of the soul. The modern appetite, fueled by endless stimulation, has led us to misunderstand strength. We see the dramatic outburst, the sudden win, the relentless hustle, and think that is power. But a mind that is constantly reacting to news headlines, to social validation, to a sudden slight, is a mind that is entirely owned by external events. It is a ship caught in a relentless storm, tossed and turned by waves it cannot control. The Stoic, conversely, seeks to become the captain who, while recognizing the ferocity of the waves, chooses the precise set of the sails and the angle of the rudder. The power isn't in stopping the storm, it's in choosing the response. The foundational principle of this inner forge is the dichotomy of control. In simple terms, this means cleanly dividing the world into two concentric circles: the things you have absolute authority over and everything else. What falls within your absolute control? Your judgments about events, your intentions behind actions, and your will or your choice to be virtuous or not. Everything else, your body's health, the weather, other people's opinions, the outcome of any endeavor, is ultimately outside your fortress. Most people spend 90% of their energy trying to control the uncontrollable, leaving them perpetually exhausted and vulnerable. The Stoic, drawing a razor-sharp line, reserves all their effort for what Seneca called the master faculty, that inner citadel of choice. This is where the ancient wisdom corrects a pervasive modern delusion: the belief that all feelings are facts, or that comfort is the goal. We are encouraged to follow our passion or protect our peace by avoiding stress. But the mind, like muscle, doesn't grow stronger in safety. It grows stronger under load. True peace isn't protected. It's earned by walking through fire. The legendary swordsman's strength lay not in his blade, but in his utter composure when facing death. That composure wasn't a gift. It was the result of Chakra's voluntary discomfort and relentless mental training, the equivalent of lifting weights with the soul. I once knew a man, we'll call him Victor, who fell prey to this exact delusion, leading to a preventable downfall. Victor had a brilliant idea for a new technology, and for 2 years he was disciplined, rising early, rejecting distractions. He treated his time like a precious, finite resource. But when his first major investor backed out unexpectedly, a completely external event, Victor collapsed, not physically, but mentally. He had staked his entire identity on that outcome, treating the deal's closure as something within his control. He became consumed by rage at the investor and despair over his loss of status. The Stoic would say he had confused his intention to create value and act diligently with the event, the market's capricious nature. He lost 2 years of productivity, not because the deal failed, but because he allowed an external setback to hijack his internal state. His emotional reaction, the rage and self-pity, was the true failure, a betrayal of his own choice-making faculty. The lesson is plain. External events are merely data, never a mandate for despair. This is the hard-won wisdom that defines the formidable presence. The person who doesn't panic when the world fractures around them is the one who understands they can always choose their inner response. This is the moment to reflect on your own inner mirror. When chaos erupts, do you act from a clear, premeditated principle, or do you act from sheer panic? If your emotions still run the show, you are not the master of your fate. You are merely a slave to noise. To cultivate this mastery, we must integrate negative visualization into our daily practice. This is not morbid dwelling, but a mental exercise in premeditating evils. Musashi, the master swordsman, meditated on death not for poetic effect, but to rob it of its power. The Stoic does the same. What is the worst-case scenario if this proposal fails? If this relationship ends? If this social media post is mocked? When you have already made peace with the worst case, the fear loses its grip. You are no longer moving like a fragile civilian, desperately avoiding pain. You are moving with the resolute clarity of a weapon, prepared to take action despite the risk. My own awakening to this principle was a protracted and delayed affair. For years, I had a tendency toward procrastination, a subtle form of self-sabotage. I rationalized it as waiting for inspiration or allowing the idea to mature. The reality was fear of execution. It came to a head during a crucial professional project that required sustained, grueling effort. I remember staring at the blank page, feeling the weight of the task, when a simple line from Epictetus came back to me. We are disturbed not by things, but by the views we take of them. I wasn't disturbed by the task. I was disturbed by my judgment that the task was inherently difficult, tedious, and an existential threat to my ego if it failed. My transformation began with a single, brutal commitment to kill the impulse toward distraction. This wasn't about being motivated. It was about building a scaffolding of habit, so strong that my feelings became irrelevant. I treated the desk like the battlefield, deleted unnecessary apps, instituted fixed, non-negotiable work periods. When the urge to check a notification or seek an easy pleasure arose, I didn't fight the feeling. I simply observed it and then chose not to comply. This delayed awakening taught me the crucial distinction. The feeling is an involuntary reflex. The action is a choice. You don't need to stop feeling fear. You just need to stop acting on fear. By treating my inner noise as mere data, like a passing cloud, I finally began to move with a quiet, efficient intensity. The project succeeded, not because I found a sudden burst of genius, but because I had, moment by moment, refused to allow my inner turbulence to dictate my outer action. This is the credible path to unbreakable presence. You must create inner silence. The mind of the master is quieter than his breath. In our modern, saturated world, people fear silence. They need the constant noise of the screen, the music, the chatter, because the moment the noise stops, the real enemy, their own unexamined thoughts, their regrets, their anxieties, shows up. Musashi intentionally sought the quiet of the cave. He ran toward the voice in his head, staring it down until it was tamed. This practice, the stillness, the deep, focused contemplation, the deliberate withdrawal from superficial stimulation, turns your mind into a fortress. Once your thoughts cease to control you, you begin to control everything that matters. This control isn't about crushing others, it's about maximized agency. Machiavelli understood that when you are unpredictable, when your emotions aren't visible or exploitable, you are terrifyingly powerful because others cannot model your behavior. The Stoic achieves this not through calculation, but through elimination. By eliminating the irrational, impulsive, and reactive elements from their decision-making process, they become perfectly, surgically predictable to themselves, and therefore utterly inscrutable to those who rely on emotional cues. When you do not beg, do not flinch, and do not need validation, people see an existential threat to their assumptions about human nature. This brings us to the final necessary nuance. We must distinguish between the virtue of discipline and the modern misuse of the Stoic aesthetic. Discipline is not a license for cruelty or emotional suppression. It is the ability to choose the good. A Stoic can feel deep compassion, profound love, or sharp grief, but they choose how to act in light of those feelings. They do not allow the feeling to become an excuse for irrational or unjust behavior. They preserve their honor, their commitment to wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, even when their body or status is abandoned. That is the core difference. Modern life often encourages us to protect our emotional state through avoidance. The Stoic calls us to strengthen our will through confrontation. This relentless focus is the single most common delusion about self-mastery that guarantees failure. The open loop we planted at the start. We believe we can delegate our inner work. We imagine that external success, the perfect job, the right partner, the motivational speech, will somehow fix the chaos inside. But the Stoics insist that the external world is fundamentally indifferent. You must build the mind first. The external structure, the career, the relationships, is merely a reflection of the inner architecture. Therefore, the portable lesson, the code you can carry into the fray of modern life, is simple. Act from principle, not panic. When the noise arrives, the disrespect, the betrayal, the sudden setback, do not ask, "How do I feel?" Ask only, "What is the virtuous, strategic, and most helpful thing to do right now, regardless of the outcome?" You must train your mind to be so stable, so locked in, that nothing can hijack it. Once you master the execution of your chosen values, you don't need to talk about power. You simply become it. You now possess the map to the forge. You understand that the world is full of noise, but you must become the silence inside it. You understand that they can take your money, your status, even your body. But if you have done the work, they will never ever touch your mind. That is your unassailable empire. Now that we have established the architecture of control, the natural next chapter is mastering the element that threatens it most: time. How does a Stoic view time management not as a productivity hack, but as a moral discipline? That will be our focus next.